Now, ironically, at the time that I'm recording this video, the Chicago Bulls are about to play the Milwaukee Bucks, and depending on how that game goes, it could shape how this video is interpreted. So, could go positive, could go negative, more likely to lean negative given that they're playing the Milwaukee Bucks. But I wanted to talk about the Chicago Bulls because, as much as it pains me to admit it, because I have put myself into the position of denying any positive thing because I don't want to be hurt anymore. As much as it pains me to say, I must admit, Chicago Bulls have been pretty freaking good ever since the trade deadline. And why? Well, primarily been a defensive change. And if you want a in-depth video explaining how the defense has changed to allow the Chicago Bulls to be so much better, my good friend Alex Hoops made a video very recently about their defense and how it's really unique and really no other team in the league is doing it. But the Bulls have stepped up significantly as a defense and has allowed them to have a winning record and one of the best records in the league ever since that deadline or the All-Star break. They're really roughly the same time frame. But there's a variety of reasons outside of the defense that have helped. Of course, there's Patrick Beverly's influence on the team, as much as, again, I hate to admit it because I've historically not been a huge fan of Patrick Beverly, as many NBA fans are not. The thing that people who were fans of teams that Patrick Beverly was on, the thing they always said was, you hate to play against them, you love to have him on your team. And what can I say? It's correct. Having a guy be an absolute dick, but on behalf of your team, is pretty nice and appreciated. It almost feels like this is a weird way to put this. It's almost like Patrick Beverly is a Bulls fan who got to play for the Bulls. I think he literally is because he grew up in Chicago, but like he has always brought that same passion to his other teams. Like it's like the way that he plays, he cares so much about winning very clearly. And you have to respect that even if you don't necessarily respect the way that he does it. Of course, he has a history of making dirty plays, and in no way do I respect that. But tries hard on defense, is so serviceable enough offensively, just hitting open shots. Hopefully not trying to do too much, because sometimes he does. And is a good leader. And you feel that what he brings energy-wise kind of applies to the whole team. One thing that has really bothered me about the Bulls is that on top of being bad, they kind of came across as though they were just content with that, as though they did not care. Very nonchalant and dead. The lack of chemistry on the team, the lack of effort, the lack of seeming to have interest in literally the game they're currently participating in. Having that energy is detrimental to a team. If you really are getting the feeling that everyone's just kind of doing their job, clocking in, clocking out, there's no passion behind it, that team's already dead. It doesn't matter how good they are on paper. If that's what they have going on internally, it's not going to work. That's kind of been the case for the Brooklyn Nets over the past couple of years, or even the Los Angeles Clippers to some extent. You cannot not have players who are impassioned and seriously care about winning outside of just the surface level of like, yeah, I care about winning, whatever. Like, they need to be about that shit. And having someone like that finally on this team kind of made and spread throughout the whole team and made everybody about that shit. And it has made a world of difference, and it's led to a ton of discipline on defense. And then, of course, Billy Donovan's defensive scheme deserves a ton of credit. I have not been a big fan of Billy Donovan historically, but he pretty much typically always finds a way to make a not good defensive core pretty good defensively. Obviously, with Patrick and Alex Caruso, I would assume is really talented as a defensive player. Patrick Williams has been really good this year by comparison to his previous 2 years. Derrick Jones Jr. is cool when he plays. Javonte Green, although he's not played in a long while. But in general, not a ton of great defenders. You got Zach LaVine, you got DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, your core 3 star players, because I don't think Vucevic really is that anymore. But what they were supposed to be, all defensive issues to some degree or another. But in the case of the defensive scheme that Billy Donovan has created, it has made both DeMar and especially Zach not liabilities defensively, and more surprising than anything else, made Nikola Vucevic super effective. Like, I would definitely argue that since the All-Star break, Nikola Vucevic has been a plus defender like a good, legitimately good defender. Not just like we view him as bad, but let's give him some credit. He's actually okay. Like, no, legit good. Nikola Vucevic has been legit good on defense. I'm going to explain the defensive scheme very poorly. Again, watch my good friend Alex Hoops' video. It's a very good video. But essentially the defensive scheme is, as far as if I'm correct on this, they're stepping up on the screens and being real switch heavy, super duper switch heavy. And they're doing their rotation in such a way that very often they're putting themselves in the situation where one player is guarding two, which obviously sounds like a negative thing, but the rotations of the rest of the players are planned in such a way that that one player can run in the direction of whoever gets the ball. So if there's a guy in the corner, a guy on the wing, someone passes it from the paint to one of them, the defender who's in between them can cover the ground to get a good contest if they decide to shoot it right off of the catch, or if they try to pass it to the open guy. By the time that pass would happen, someone has already rotated over to get that guy open. So they've managed to swarm ball handlers and block passing lanes and really be troublesome and pest-like on defense, but also have a scheme that's disciplined enough and aware of everything going on enough to have rotations ready to make up for the holes that they're creating. So they are kind of playing with fire at times, but playing with fire safely in a way that ultimately creates both frantic and chaotic defense, but also disciplined defense. And there's really no one else playing defense like that in this league, and they deserve credit for, and Billy Donovan deserves credit for getting a ton out of them. Now, offensively speaking, still a ton of problems. Still don't feel good about this team, but one positive, Nikola Vucevic this year in general been better than he was last year. And Zach LaVine started off this year really poorly, was looking like a real mistake contract-wise because, of course, he just got his big payday this last offseason. But he's at like 31 points on ridiculous efficiency over the last like month and a half. And he's been electric. He's been fantastic. Cannot be happier with how he's played lately. And again, as mentioned in this defensive scheme, Zach LaVine has proven to be a far more useful defensive player because he knows explicitly what his rotation is when it comes, and he also has always been a pretty all-right one-on-one defender. So he can serve in that swarming sense, and he's also managing to nail the uniform and locked-in and disciplined side of the defensive scheme. So, yeah, could not be happier with him. I still hate how much this offense is predicated on mid-range shots. I still hate how poor the three-point shooting on this team is. I understand that Zach and DeMar especially, obviously, are really good from mid-range, but ultimately, being good from mid-range does not replace or make up for being bad from three in the modern game. It can mitigate it to an extent, but it does not solve the problem outright. And as a whole, the Bulls' offense ends up being a math problem that they lose because they're taking mid-range shots and the other team is taking threes. But yeah, that's my take on the Chicago Bulls. Do I think they're contenders? Hell no. Do I think they're going to go anywhere in the playoffs? Hell no. Do I think they're going to win the play-in? Probably. I think there's a good chance that happens. But ultimately, it's just going to be losing in the first round to the Celtics or the Sixers. Or the Bucks. Celtics and the Bucks. Those are the two seeds. So yeah. It's not a big deal, but I do ultimately... I'm glad that they ended on a positive note. If they could carry this defense into next season and retool in a way that really adds a lot of shooting to this team without sacrificing that defense, then you could talk me into them being a 50-win team next year and, you know, at least being fun and watchable. Contenders still no, not with the core that they have, but they could retool this team into being a respectable NBA team for a full 82 games. And I could live with that. Obviously, I'd rather them blow it all up, but if they're going to play this game, at least they're doing it well lately.